All right, let's talk real quick about cranking up the drama. Having seen everybody's episode threads, I get a sense that you have an idea of where you want to go with stuff, but that maybe some episodes aren't full episodes, or that the conflict that's in them isn't quite substantial enough to warrant an entire, say, 22-minute episode dedicated to it. So let's take a look at some ways to amp things up a bit. All right. So one of the central things that we haven't really talked about is figuring out what your main characters want. If you do all of the sort of back story on each of the characters and you go through that giant worksheet with all of the possible questions that you could answer, you're going to find it out. Or at least you're going to take a stab at it in the dark. And you may take some writing to figure out what your character really is about, but in as much as it's possible to do so, figure out what they're all about at the beginning, and that can make you basically create all of the plot around those wants and needs. If you figure out those things, you make them high stakes, and suddenly the plot sorts of things start to come out. It becomes less meandering and it becomes more serious. So we're going to talk about wants, we're going to talk about needs, and needs are the essential ones. They're the central ones that are going to come back episode after episode. And I want to remind people that needs are not necessarily plot-centric things. Like in Die Hard, it's not that McClane needs to defeat the terrorist. He wants to defeat the terrorist. He needs to reconcile with his wife and get his family back together. So think of wants as like the immediate sort of plot things that need to get solved. And those are really sort of, they'll seem like they seem like they're at the top of the list, but they're actually secondary to that character's long-held needs. To that, I'm going to add that don't forget that humans are social animals. The need for a character, therefore, is probably going to be what might seem like a soft thing, like family and relationships. It sounds like, oh, that's not very dramatic, but it is. It is the kind of things that are going to drag out the drama so that you can actually get multiple episodes out of these concepts. In a typical sitcom, the want might be very specific to that episode. It's sort of a throwaway thing that is not essential to the understanding of the property at large, but is a gag, for example. Oh, remember the one where they blank? But it's going to always hang off of and be related to the character's central needs. So my wife used to watch this religiously, that 70s show. And so I absorbed it sort of by osmosis, and it's typical of the stuff of the period. And in fact, somewhat a lost art, that's sort of multicam sitcom in an audience sort of situation, but classic television by that nature. So here's a synopsis for an episode. When an upset Kitty, that's the mom, discovers that the kids have their own plans for Thanksgiving, heaven forbid, Red, that's the dad, guilts Eric, the son, into giving up his Styx tickets. Styx was a big band in the mid to late 70s, to stay home for the holiday. When an upset Kitty discovers the kids have their own plans for Thanksgiving, Red guilts Eric into giving up his Styx tickets to stay home for the holiday. So Eric Fortman has a want. I've got these tickets to Styx. He sings to the group in the basement. Grand illusion gets them all excited about going, and then he has to deal with his actual need, which is the continued love of his family and his friends. It'll all come back to, with that character, the need to be wanted. So in that 70s show example, the conflict stems from the tension between those two things. I could go to this concert I really want to go to, but as long as I'm still living in this house, I have to get along with my overbearing dad and my clingy mom, for example. So drama at its best is giving you that situation where the characters have to choose between two impossible choices. You know, and you do that over and over again maybe at every act break. That would be great. A dramatic show, Lost, from about the same period, early 2000s. The characters need to get off the island. There's a physical, um, it's for their safety. It's getting back to their families. It's so on. All the things that were true of Gilligan's Island with none of the laughs. But their want is to understand what's going on, to know the mystery of the island, and to figure out what is really happening to them. And think about this. Here comes a boat that's going to pick me up, and I will survive. Am I going to choose between, gee, I really wonder what that mystery is, or I want to get home to my family? They're going to go with the family thing. So if you need to choose between life and plot knowledge, what do you think is a real person going to choose in that situation? This is why we get mad at horror movies. Why did that guy go into the basement? Well, there was a noise. But you should know by now. Everybody's dying. Don't go into the basement. So we know that we wouldn't choose that way in that situation, so that doesn't ring true. And we kind of throw our hands up and go, well, it's part of the genre of that. But you can fight that. You can have your characters. I'm not saying your characters shouldn't go into the basement, because they'll need to. But we want to differentiate between needs and wants. Character in Halloween needs to survive. Character in Halloween wants to go into the car because she's going to go drive to the neighbor's house. And then she finds out that Michael Myers is sitting in the back seat. From my story that I'm currently working on, I actually took this opportunity to articulate this because I don't think I knew this until I wrote it for this presentation. My male lead, Frank Bottoms, the movie actor, wants to get his studio job back because he's grown accustomed to the lifestyle. He's got bills to pay. He says in the pilot that if this show gets canceled, he's kind of screwed. So he's got an immediate want of, oh shit, I lost my job. But his long-term need is to be that star and to feel popular because he's substituted fame for real relationships. He doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a wife or a girlfriend. Or if he does, they don't last. So he's, probably a fairly typical actor from that standpoint. You're trading the one for the other. Will he discover that he really needs a real relationship by the end of a season? Perhaps. Will one of his needs be fulfilled through the conflict? Possibly. So there's room for this character to move. His partner and ostensibly the lead of the show, giving her the voiceover. So she can be construed as the main character. She was a little harder to figure out. As the eyes of the audience, she's figuring out the drama as it unfolds. So her want is not unlike the characters in Lost. They want to find out the mystery. She wants to find out the mystery of this cursed film print. And she's motivated to do so by the end of the first episode because her friend is killed by a projectionist who was running the film and went crazy. So what's going on? If that's where we stopped, I want to figure out what happened to my friend. That's pretty good, but that's not. I don't know if that's elevated to a need level. So for her need might seem secondary in the action, but is to be taken seriously and treated equally as a person, which is not the way scenes unfold. She is, it's the 1930s. She's a woman. She's in the workplace and doing something that is not considered traditional, but she's extremely good at, and was at the time considered a traditional role for a woman, which is an editor. So we have it fits within the world, but she can also have the kinds of sexism things to deal with. And I'm finding as I'm writing her that she's had enough. She's already had enough. I started out that she was kind of an innocent character, but she doesn't take shit from the men, which is kind of exciting to see. It's going to get her into some trouble. Which is great. So this leads me to something else I'm going to talk about. B conflict, like if she's going to be shooting her off her mouth in a world that is fraught with male domination, what are the consequences of that? And that's going to get us not our A conflict, but certainly our B conflict. I could do A conflict with it, but it's not a relationship show. It's a show about monsters. So that'll be our B stuff. You might do something different. If you're not doing a visually driven show, if you're doing a show that is characters talking and working out emotions, what you're going to elevate to A is different than what I'm going to. So you should decide at the beginning where your priorities lie. Is it about the people, or is it about the shit that happens? So I'm writing a kind of shit happens show, and emotion's going to prop that up and make us care about it. That's my goal. All right. When we say, hey, outline a season, you're probably going to find yourself going, oh, I don't know. I got like 9 holes still open here. What am I going to? Don't feel the need to fill them. If you're only ever make a pilot and a pitch book for this project, pitch book doesn't need more than about 5 proofs of concept that you have, that the story has legs, that the story engine can produce plot ideas, and you don't have to go deep on them at all. They just need to give the promise that somebody who had that information could go and write that and produce an entire full-length episode out of that. So don't add filler, because if you find yourself and you feel like you're adding filler, the audience is going to smell that. They're going to detect that and go, like, this, nothing's really happening here. We're just kind of treading water, walking on a treadmill. So what you can do instead is to add things that are off the spine of the A story. It just means that you probably don't have enough A story, and that's where your B's and C's come in. Think of it as ways you're not filling space, you're delaying the conclusion of that main plot. So you may have your A story, and you know that it's going to a very specific conclusion, but think about ways that you can slow it down by hindering the good guy, hindering the protagonist. And that might be by your B and C characters, and it might be ones that mean well. So I was thinking about that. I don't know why this one came up, but the Pee Wee Herman Christmas special, which is kind of fantastic, loaded with musical numbers, stars of the period, and the usual cast. Pee Wee Herman wants this giant list of things from Santa. It becomes a joke. Conky prints it out and it rolls out onto the floor. He puts up a stocking that's about 8 feet tall on his. It's just, he's very clearly obsessed with. It's a beautiful 80s statement. Just the material culture of I need presents. But every couple of minutes, neighbors are coming on the door. Hey, I've got you your present. And every time it's fruitcake. Every single neighbor of the usual cast is bringing him fruitcake. So it's hindered. They mean well, but it's delaying us getting to the point where Santa comes in and goes, Pee Wee, you really can't have everything that you want. That's not how Christmas works. And Pee Wee learns. Pee Wee learns the real meaning of Christmas. Perfect hour of entertainment. I highly recommend it. All right. Look for, in your synopses, the following red flags. And I did this to some folks that went through your plot ideas and highlighted words that were not action words. He discovers. She decides. Anything that sounds like it's mental doesn't belong in a TV show or a movie. It belongs in a book. Those sorts of things, these decision-making things, can certainly be dramatic. But the goal, I think, of the visual storyteller is to coax those things into visual territory, and in so doing, make it into a show rather than a book, a novel. So part of that process is taking the internal and turning it into something external. Instead of discovering the clue, sure, he can discover that clue, but now because he's done that, there are consequences. The killers are chasing him. Okay, she can decide to tell her boss what she really thinks, but now she's got to do that. And when she does, consequences. Now, maybe she's got a lawsuit against her. Get the characters going. Audiences like characters that do, not that have things done to them. That's our life experience. We want to see characters who take action. So here's what characters can do, ranked by order of their usefulness to the plot. Finding stuff out. Well, a lot of people need this in order to tell their story. It's good. Characters need to find stuff out, but they're not really doing things. The stakes are pretty low. Does the discovery of the information matter? They know something now, the audience, and it's this usually is we need them to find this out so the audience can know something that the writer knows. So how can we turn this into high stakes? Maybe the discovery of the information is a problem. Maybe it changes their relationship with somebody that they are related to. Whatever. Next one, the characters have things done to them. That's better because stuff is visual, stuff is happening, but they're not driving the action. You see this in sitcoms where the group is at home, and it's necessary because it's such a static medium. The group is in the main set, and in comes Michael Richards comes in the door with his hair crazy, and he's got something. Things are being done to the main characters. They're not driving the action is coming to them. Okay, it's better, but it's still not good. Reacting to things that are done to them. Okay, Michael Richards runs in crazy shirt. Oh, my God. And then they take action based on that external stimuli. That's a little bit better. They're at least moving. Better yet, they're taking action to fulfill one of those central wants or needs. That's an action that they own completely. So Eric Forman took it upon himself before the episode began, presumably, to obtain Styx tickets. Now, if you wanted to stretch that out, he could have difficulty obtaining Styx tickets. That would make the value of these Styx tickets even better, right? If he had to wait in line, or he had to fight a bully, or his money got stolen, or they were almost sold out and he had to trade his leather jacket to a guy working outside the theater as a scalper. There's lots of ways to delay that bit of satisfaction. I believe that in that episode. I don't know if I've seen it, but I feel like I probably have. He probably starts the episode with tickets in hand. And that limits the conflict to be basically at the house, I think, which is good for them. Budgetarily, you need to also consider, do I need them to go out into the world? Is that enough of the drama to warrant in a show like that? A new set? Shows like that are kind of amazing in that they're taking place in front of a studio audience and they have to build everything. Those single camera shows have it a little bit easier in that they can actually go to a location. They don't have to drag along an audience of 150 people to make their show. So maybe an exercise here would be to think about your favorite story. Terminator display behind me. Who's the lead character? Sarah Connor. What's their need? Survival. Somebody's after her. Somebody's killing her. What do they do about it? Reluctantly team with somebody who claims he's from the future. Maybe he's insane. Maybe he's not. But that guy who's trying to kill me sure seems to be real. The need is simple in survival. What does her want? Well, she's working as a waitress at a restaurant, which is extremely unfulfilling. She's in her early 20s, so she probably thought that by now things would be better and different. She's in a big city with one friend as a roommate. So when that roommate's busy, she goes to a movie by herself. So probably she's interested in a relationship. What do they do about it? Yeah. So try that on your own, and see if you can identify the wants in some favorite things. That was just off the top of my head. I don't know if it's right or not. You could do that in reverse for Kyle Reese, who comes back to save her. What's their need? He's actually in love with Sarah, but his want is to fulfill the mission that John Connor sent him back on, which is to save his mother. Plot spoiler. Great fucking movie. Okay. And the first one's better than the second one. I'm just going to go out and say that. Making each episode matter. So you got this big list of 13 or 10 or 20 things, and you're finding that some of those are just not stacking up in terms of their importance to the central conflict, perhaps. So some ways to do this, or to make each one of those sort of matter on the matter meter, right? Like, wow, that was a great episode. They should say at the end of every one of those. The appearance of that, the illusion of a good episode, is that it ends with something that has something massive happening, right? And it's not so much that something massive is resolved at the end, but something massive starts up at the end for these serial storytelling. Now, if you're doing self-contained things, if it's comedy, you could tease a new problem. That's a kind of a classic tag. But the satisfaction comes from the resolution of the thing. So look at your individual plot pieces and decide, do they accomplish anything? Is the ball moved down the court with each episode? Try to have some kind of conclusion near the end of the episode in which something is resolved, and then add a little something that maybe a new thing starts up. I would say make the problem directly related to the character's wants or needs, and know that if you don't know those wants or needs, you really can't design those things. Here's something that will help to make each episode matter. Think about it in acts. Minimally, there's 3 acts. You might have 4 or 5, depending on... and really, if you have 4 or 5, what you're really doing is splitting up the classic Act 2 into a couple of pieces. Basically, assume that Act 1 is we introduce the problem, Act 2, the problem gets worse, and Act 3, it's fixed, and then there's a tag at the end in which a new problem emerges, possibly as a result of the actions in Act 3. If it's an Act... a 4-act or a 5-act structure, what you're really doing is taking that Act 2, the getting worse thing, and making that a double act. Act 2 is often the fattest. Consider that it's 2 or 3 problems that are hanging on the spine of the original problem, and in order to solve the A problem, they need to go through these B and C problems to get there. So that's how you get that extra number. You can also think about it in terms of percentage of pages. Recalling that if you properly set, and I'm hoping that everybody does, set up their template for screenwriting in the proper screenwriting format, or use a professional screenwriting tool, free or otherwise, to lay things out correctly on the page, know that you have approximately 1 page of finished script to 1 page of finished product. It gets a little bit fatter with animation because it tends to be more descriptive. So you might have, say, a 25-plus page script for a 22-minute episode. So think in terms of percentage of pages. Maybe 20% of the activity is introducing the problem, 50% is the problem getting worse, and 20% is the fix, and 10% is the setup of the new trouble. So if it's a 25-page thing, 2.5 pages are dedicated to creating a new problem at the end of that episode. Just look at it in terms of the sheer number value. And then you'll learn through doing how long does it take me to get an idea out? How much screen time do my ideas take to execute? Okay. Hopefully that's a whole bunch of new stuff that can help you to hone those existing ideas and get things really happening for those characters.